This is project 4. We are on stage 1, working with the color swatches. If you have oddball things that pop up from the last lesson that you did, you can go to your essentials. Well, not yet, but you can go up to essentials and you can reset essentials so that everything goes back to factory. When you open up your first file, which is Summit Map, you are going to get a notification about missing fonts. To clear this up, select Find Fonts. Make sure that you replace with a font from your system, and then find something on your system that is a nice sans serif font that's pretty plain and clear to read, and select it in Fonts in System and select Change All. That will get rid of that pink background behind the text, which is an indication that a font is missing. And then you can view and fit your artboard in the window, and then you can collapse your libraries. We are going to be working with some color swatch management. So you can first of all open up your color swatches, and we're going to change the view to small list view, which is going to give you a humongous list. But we are going to delete a whole bunch of these things. What I'd like you to do next, which is out of order from what was in the book, is to select your unused colors and throw them in the trash. Select the gray folder and throw that into the trash. We don't need that. We are going to start by managing some items and creating a new swatch. We're going to pull the swatches panel and set it up to the side because we're going to be working with our gradient panel, and we need to have both of these available, so I'm pulling that off as well. We're going to be building a new gradient. In the type of gradient, we're going to change from a linear to a radial. The radial color starts from the center and goes to the outside. And we're going to replace the black and white and build a custom gradient swatch. Select the left-hand slider on your gradient ramp and replace the color there with the C7 almost white. You won't see much of a change when you drag that. Next, we're going to change the black slider by dragging in the cyan 36 swatch. I'm not going to read all of that every time. It gets too long. But there's the start of our new radial ramp. We're going to add another color. We're going to drop in the color that starts with cyan 22 and pull that somewhere in the middle and change the location to about 67% on the ramp. You can slide it, you can type it in the field, that's fine. We're going to add that same cyan 36 color to a spot at about 33% on the ramp. And then I'd like you to click that slider. Let's bring that up a little bit more there. Double click the slider to open up the options panel. If you get the swatches coming up, select the color icon, looks like a palette that an artist would use, and change the slider, not the opacity, but we're taking it down to 70% of the color, or close to it. And you can collapse that by clicking off of it. We now have a gradient, radial gradient going up here, and we're going to add that to our swatches panel simply by clicking on that swatch sample and dragging it onto our swatches panel. That's why we needed both of them open. Double click to change the name to Ice Radial and hit enter. If you use spot colors in a gradient, you need to use spot colors all the way through. If you create a gradient that blends from a spot color to a process color build, there is no way of knowing what that result is going to be. It could be really odd. So it's best not to do this. You can do a spot color to white, and that is discussed on the bottom of page 182. Next, in the gradient panel, choose linear in the type, and we're not changing the ramp. We're going to repeat bringing this in, and now we're going to change the name on this to Ice Linear. So now we have both a radial and a linear swatch using that same color combination. You're going to use this by selecting, oh, let me get my selection tool, not my type tool. I'm selecting the lake shape on the artboard, and we are going to refill this. We can actually do it from here. Make sure that the fill is active and fill that with the Ice Radial. The applied radial is centered on the selected object. You're going to pick up your gradient tool and change the slider. You're going to start near the top area of the lake and drag to the bottom. When you first choose the gradient tool, the gradient annotator is going to be horizontal. After you complete this, the annotator will match whatever line you drag with the gradient tool. Since we're using a radial, the first place we click defines the center or starting point of the applied gradient, and where you release marks the outer edge. And anything beyond the outer edge will fill with the end color of the gradient. And whatever direction you drag is the angle that the gradient is going to run. In the gradient panel, change the aspect ratio field to 50%. Changing the aspect ratio converts the gradient shape to an ellipse instead of a circle. The 50% aspect ratio means that the gradient's height is now only half of its width. Using the selection tool, select the rectangle that's around the logo and the legend at the bottom. You're going to apply Ice Linear to the stroke. Click the Apply Gradient Along Stroke button. By using the Apply Gradient Along Stroke option, the gradient is applied in a linear fashion. You can see in our rectangle, though, that the starting point is located at the bottom right corner of the stroke, and the gradient travels around the shape until the ending point meets the same corner. Now, to see how this changes, we're going to click the Apply Gradient Across Stroke button. Using the Apply Gradient Across Stroke option, the gradient begins at the outside edge of the path and ends on the inside edge. In addition to applying stroke attributes to a path, you can use the Width tool to adjust the shape of a stroke at any point along a specific path. This takes way beyond the ability to manipulate the points and the segments that make up the shape. We're going to modify the path that surrounds the legend. We need to pick up the Width tool in the tool panel. Navigate to the top left corner of the legend box and move the cursor over the top left corner of the legend box. When you see the word anchor, it's hard to see with the green text against the blue line, but you want to select the anchor corner. Click and drag away from the point. We want to get a width that's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. So just going to drag diagonally. And look at how that's changing that. And then release your mouse button. With a path selected, clicking with the width tool adds a width point, and you can drag out from that width point to add symmetrical width handles, and those change the stroke width at the point along the path. If you click and drag an existing width handle, the opposite handle is also affected. When the width tool cursor is over an existing stroke, the cursor feedback shows the overall width of the stroke at that point, as well as the width of each side of the stroke. So clicking and dragging with the width tool adds symmetrical handles on both sides, and cursor feedback shows the width of each side and the overall width of the point. Move the cursor until the feedback shows an intersect with the center of the place logo. Press your Alt or Option key and drag down until the cursor feedback shows that side 2 is approximately 0.08 of an inch. When you press the Alt key while you're dragging from the width point, you will add a non-symmetrical width handle. You can also Alt or Option click an existing width handle and drag to adjust it independently of the opposing handle. Now, about halfway across, we're going to click and drag down to initiate the width points and then drag up until the overall width of the point is about 0.1 or 1/10 of an inch. So let's find the midpoint. It should be right around in here someplace. There, intersect, that should be about the center. And again, click and drag down to get the points starting. And now we're going to close this width down. We want this width to be about 0.1. There, right about 1/10 of an inch. That narrows that down a little bit. The two sides of the stroke are already different because you created non-symmetrical handles. Dragging the handles of this point maintains the proportional relationship between the two sides. Double-click the point that we just created, and you'll get the width point edit box. Activate the link and change the width of side 1 to 4/100 of an inch. So it's 0.04. And hit your tab button to accept that. And that will highlight the side 2 field. And you'll see that side 2 also changed proportionally because we had those linked. Click OK. And that will close the dialog box. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Click the point that we were adjusting and drag right until that point is approximately 2/3 of the way across the frame edge. When you release the mouse button, you can see the effect of moving one width point on the overall path. The lower edge of the path is very close to the logo, so you should edit the path width at that point to provide a slightly larger gap between the logo and the path. Double-click the width point above the logo on the top of the frame edge. Change the side 2 field, make sure that they're unchained, and change the side 2 field to 7/100 of an inch and click OK. Add and adjust width points along the bottom shape of the path until you're satisfied with your overall design.